no more, no, no more, no, no more, no, no, no more, no.
We're back with another episode of Coffee with April. I'm right in the process of preparing for the World Brewers Championship later in November in Belo Horizonte, Brazil, where I'm representing Sweden as our current Brewers Champion. And I want to give you just a brief update, kind of where am I in this process, how does this process look for me for April, what do we have in mind, what do we, do's and don'ts throughout the process. Obviously, it will remain until November to be seen whether this process is sufficient or good enough, but regardless of what, we figured why not share it. So, World Brewers Championship, what does that mean? Well, it means that going from a national championship, even if you're a winner with very good scores, then it will definitely change everything, right? It's just a game changer. Whereas most of the times, your national win is not a good representative of how you will actually perform in the World Championships, because the judging is slightly different, at least on another level of the quality. The competition is very different, as in you're up against people on higher level than you were on your national. And I feel a lot of the times what is expected from you is very different as well. So step one was that we realized very early on that we need to kind of switch a few gears up. So basically after winning in February, practicing started more or less directly, focusing on concept, focusing on technical stuff, focusing on understanding the concept, which is a dialogue with a lot of different people with a good experience of the competition over time, that have been able to kind of show me at least their perspective on what the competition wants from you as a competitor now, and what it actually takes to end up in that kind of top six. Because when you're competing in a competition like this, you need a clear goal. I believe that in the national as well, whereas if you go into the goal and if you go into the national and you say, okay, so my goal is to have fun, which everyone should have, but let's say that's your only goal, then you're probably not going to win. The person that goes in and say, I'm here to win, if that person put in the effort needed behind that, will win, or at least more likely than you. Because in the end of the day, it takes focus, it takes dedication, it takes time, and it takes you actually doing the hard work to be able to do it. So that's kind of step one. Set a goal, realize where you want to be, and I say top six because we're pitching on top six. That's how we do things at April. We're trying to be as high as we can. The reason why I don't say a specific place in top six is because I think we all know with time and experience that anyone in that top six has the potential of taking it home. Anyone. I think we see that every year, and I think if you roll the dice or you push the final several times, I'm sure that the winner in that top six will be different every single time. There's nothing clearly indicating that there's one person that is exponentially way better than all of the other ones in that top six. It's really a bit of luck. It's really a bit of you just having a good day, being able to perform at the very top. So that's a goal in mind. Normally, when competing, I say you should never actually go in with a certain position in mind, because it's very hard to train for that, because you don't necessarily know what you need to do to get to a certain position, because whether you want to or not, there's external factors, other competitors, that will basically decide where you need to be score-wise, able to actually end up at a position you want. So what I usually recommend doing is that you go in and you set a score, and you look at, okay, so this is the total amount of score I can get. And then you decide, okay, so this is where I want to be. Whether that is the highest score possible or in the middle or wherever you want to be, right? The benefit of doing that is that it's very easy for you to practice, because the score sheet is based on, X amount of points per X amount of different parts of the score sheet. And the interesting thing here is that we, to some extent, or at least some people in the world, actually know what I got an 8 here, I know what that means, or I need a 9 here just a score. What do I need to do to get there? There's actually, that knowledge is out there, so you can find it. And in that way, you can actually structure your training in a way where you can be relatively certain that if you perform as intended, you will actually reach the scores, which is hard enough as it is. To do the performing as intended part. We get to that later on. So that's been the kind of first part, me deciding where I want to be score-wise, setting the initial goals. After that, we're rolling into competition coffee. So the challenge here is that most of the really good coffees are obviously harvested, processed during the first months of the year. So even if you're competing later as I am, you needed to kind of make your initial decisions back then if you wanted to be sure that those copies were there. So there weren't any time for specific processing lots and so on competition-wise for me personally, because that was already underway. Luckily, we have some really good network, and I'm approaching competition coffee the way I did in the nationals, where I haven't picked one competition coffee, I picked several competition coffees. And what we did in the national is that basically on the week of the competition, just basically 3 days before, we decided which coffee to work with. And these were all different coffees, different processing, different countries. It's important when competing that you work with the coffee that is actually tasting the best at the moment, especially in brewers. You can't just pick a coffee, focus on that, and then, we all know that green coffee is going up and down. It's not a stable product, whereas you can have decided a coffee in February, and when you come to November, it will taste like crap. Then what do you do, right? Then you hedge all of that competition on this one single coffee that probably was amazing back then, but is perhaps not amazing now, right? So it's important to stay on top of that process, to not let your kind of win slip away because your green coffee isn't holding up, because the green coffee is to some extent not in your control. You can make the initial decision, but whether that decides not to taste good or not after a certain time is actually nothing you can control. So I'm trying to really focus on the variables I can control, and I can control picking a lot of different coffees to have that range with me. Apart from that, we're building a presentation. It's more or less done. I know exactly what I want to say. I know how I'm going to say it, and we're building the kind of features around it as well. Exploring obviously green coffee, exploring roasting, most importantly exploring brewing. It is a brewing competition, something that the judges reminds us again and again and again about, and I think that's a very exciting, important part. So the first part of that for me was basically me locking myself into a room, which normally I don't necessarily recommend. I think people should have a lot of outside perspective, but I also feel that I personally am at a point now where what I want to say is so clear, and it's important for me going up in World Championships that it actually comes from me. I don't want it to come from anyone else. So I'm switching the gear. You guys that kind of know me have seen that on social media as well. You haven't seen any competition posts, a preparation post, something that I've always have done in the past. And again, these videos is a way to kind of share what I'm doing, and after the competition I'll be more than happy to do a lot more specific ones than this as well. But up until then, I'm gonna make sure to really stay within my little box that I've created and do it my way 100%, and then we'll just see whatever comes out of it, right? There's still a few interesting decisions to be made. Where will the coffee be roasted? Will it be roasted in Copenhagen behind me? Will it be roasted in Brazil? Will it be roasted in the States? Who will roast the competition coffee? I'm playing around with the idea of not roasting it myself, which obviously is an interesting perspective, being the fact that I'm a coffee roaster. But it's also it's a focus thing, and it's a perspective thing, and it's also understanding to some extent what does people look for in the different coffees, and how can different roasters in the world, how are they able to actually identify different roast styles that would fit this competition better, perhaps better than mine. So that's a really interesting process. I always kind of try to keep everything open. I can say that I've had for some time sent out to a selection of coffee professionals all over the world, roasters, brewers, competitors, a bit of competition coffees as we go, as we get them in, as I roast them, just for them to have an idea, just for me to get external feedback. it's still amazing how so many of those coffee professionals have a very different opinion on the same coffee. So I think they all, to some extent, are relatively in line when it comes to deciding, okay, so this is a really good coffee, this is an amazing coffee. But when it comes to what they're pitching in terms of flavor notes, that could be so diverse. And I think it's something you really need to take into consideration moving into a competition as well, because all of those judges are gonna like different coffees, regardless of what the system might say or not. Right? They have different preference, they have different ideas about flavors and taste. They're not gonna look at everything the exact same way, and you need to have a coffee that is expressive enough for all of them to kind of categorize it, at least on the kind of subject of good, very good, excellent, and then outstanding, in the same kind of ballpark, because that's still a very big part of the competition. So that kind of quest goes on, and I think that's a very interesting thing to continue to get feedback on, which I will as well, and I'm helpful for those of you that are part of that if you're watching. So overall, it's a really interesting concept. Most importantly, competing is a really interesting concept. It's not necessarily about winning, not winning. I don't necessarily compete well, we all compete to win. It would be a lie otherwise, but that's not the most important part. So the most important part here is that when you're competing, the answer of will you ever stop competing, I would say most likely not, because competing is forcing you to get better. It's a educational system and structure that you can have on a monthly, yearly basis that will make you better at whatever it is you do, and regardless of how you perform, right? So for all of you out there, there's always something to benefit from competing, even though you're not winning, right? So you should have it as a routine more than anything else, because it's about discovering, it's about learning more about yourself. It's about understanding what you need to get better. And the benefit of it is that you have someone that will actually tell you. So you competed this year versus this year, and you're better at this or you're worse at this. So you have an opportunity for someone to actually gauge how much you're developing, how much you're improving on something, which is a very unique situation in life. You will very, very rarely have that, and you need that kind of objective feedback on yourself. It's the best educational system in the world, that will better than anything you can pay for. If you want to get better at something, you jump into a competition and you stay there and you keep on pushing it, and with time you're going to see that you will progress, and most likely also with time you're going to end up winning as well. So compete. That's the best advice I can ever give anyone that is starting with coffee. There's a lot of bullshit excuses when it comes to, I'm not ready for this, I don't know how to do this. There's a million things. They're all equally shit. Just do it. It's not difficult. You sign up, there's an email, you go there, you brew coffee, and you pitch something about it. Sure, it's not always comfortable. You will get a bit nervous. Deal with it, get over yourself. It's worth it, but you're gonna learn, right? All progress comes with you doing something that you're not 100% comfortable with. If you only do things that you're comfortable with, you're never gonna get better at coffee, and then you're always gonna, be stuck at whatever place you are right now. So get over yourself and start competing, and if you're not winning, if you're not doing good enough, take that as an opportunity to learn and understand why, and then progress and become better. So that was the first kind of recap update on me competing in the World Brewers Championship. We're gonna have more of those coming up, and I know I'm not very specific now. I know a lot of you are used with me posting a lot of competition posts, progress posts, detail posts, process posts, whatever. We're not doing that now because it's my box. I'm locking myself in big time, and I'm making sure that what I come out with on the other side is 100% coming from me. Thank you for watching. We'll bring you more of these in the future. As always, comment down here, share if you like it. That's always very appreciated. And don't forget our podcast. We just launched a bunch of new episodes with Stephen Layton, Has-Been, Michael Morgan, Standard. They're probably one of the best competitors in the history of coffee, Cappuccino from Cup and Groom. Tune in, listen to them as well. Thank you very much.
more.